Hi friends, I wanted to hop back on and revisit Danessa's Yummy Skin Tint, as I had mentioned in my Beautylish gift card video, specifically to compare it to Lisa's Skin Tint as well as my Suku foundation, which I know not the same type of product. It's more of a dedicated foundation versus a hybrid complexion skincare product like Danessa's Yummy Skin Tint, but I thought just for shade comparisons and such, it will be helpful to share. I have bare skin and a new guy here on the forehead, which I actually like to come on here with blemishes and imperfections, because if I have perfect skin and you're looking to see how this tint functions and presents itself, then I won't be much help. But if I got something to cover, then we have something to go off of. Some standby products also, I have Danessa's Blurring Balm in number 6. In addition to the Yummy Skin Tint, I also requested the Lift and Flex Concealer in shade 9. And I wanted to compare those shades to Natasha's concealer shades and a few other comparisons here in the video, and to show you side-by-side comparisons of how this skin tint performs on my skin in terms of how effective it is in blurring texture, softening the look of imperfections, and the shade 9, which I believe was light tan with neutral olive undertones, how that turns out when applied, especially compared to Lisa and Suku. So with that said, it's time for you to come in a little closer. I don't have any eyebrows on now, but stay tuned for those. We're applying Chantecaille's Lip Veil, which is basically my lip but enhanced, specifically in the shade Wild Sienna. That is better. Even without the pencil, this little brow toothbrush makes a difference. Let's go over the different textures and undertones, shall we? I'll start with Danessa's Yummy Skin. And just from the swatch alone, you can see a little tighter than Lisa's, as we will see in the next swatch. And again, this is light tan with neutral olive undertones. And Lisa's Skin Tint in number 10 has a far more liquidy texture, is a little more lightweight as well, and you can see lighter than Danessa's Serum, but I'm fine with that because ultimately, now having both complexion products in my hands, I'll combine the two. But I'll also want to do side-by-side comparisons so you can see the individual performance, the coverage, and how the undertones and shade looks on my skin. And while we're at it, I'll also go in with the Lift and Flex Concealer in number 9. We have medium with peach undertones, which I'm fine with because peach, in my opinion, is inherently a brightening for the under eye area. Next up, I have Natasha's NP10, which is a little more, I guess, neutral, is also not as light. Those will be nice together. And R5, which is far too light. This was a miscalculation on my part based on the shade generator on Natasha's site and what I had submitted as a concealer shade reference in the Lancome. And this is what popped up. This is a little too light for me, and I usually just pop it right here in and under the lower lash line because all over it would just be too white cast under my eyes. It'll be brightening, but the color will just be off, especially if I were to wear it with the Yummy Skin Tint. That would be a little silly. The Suku foundation, I know I went to concealer, but just so you can see, and I'll place it right next to the Yummy Skin swatch, the Suku is exceptional because it manages to, although look golden on the swatch, how it fuses with my not only skin texture but skin tone is impeccable, and a little lighter for sure. It's a dead-on match, and why it's tricky to wear over the summertime, because if I do get a little color on my complexion, not a lot because I do wear my sun hat and my sunscreen, but if I do have a little bit of a color difference, especially from neck to face, this ends up being a little too light, which is why I like number 9. That will be my adjuster, if you will, for future. And I had to bring in Prada again. I have my little sample from when I visited Bloomingdale's a few months ago, and I have a lot left to use. You know what it is with this foundation? The texture is amazing, right? The thing is, because it is so neutral, if I build it up too much, it could look dull on my complexion. And I noticed that one day when trying it out and wearing it, I looked at the mirror and how the light was hitting my face. I looked a little ghastly. I did, and maybe that means I have to change undertones, but I'm afraid because if I switch the undertone to be more golden, will I look off? That is my concern. It's an amazing texture and a dead-on match, but I think the trade-off with dead-on matches like the Prada foundation, which by the way, I think is M60 if I'm not mistaken, if you are a shade of twin. If you build it up, it could look a little too gray and dull. That is the issue with me. But I do have my Hourglass on standby, which also I think an excellent foundation. The Ambient Soft Glow in shade 11, which is also neutral, but surprisingly not as neutral as the Prada. You see how actually the Suku looks a little more peach. The Hourglass is neutral, but has a little bit of golden in there, which is why I love it. And then you see how neutral, almost neutral pink the Prada looks. And as we run down the swatches, we hit the Lisa swatch in number 10, which sure could look light, but because it's a tint, I could get away with it. So that means we got to start applying the Yummy Skin on one side and then the Lisa on the other. How I would like to conduct this video is provide you still shots so you can see the difference between bare skin and a tint. Does that sound like a plan? And this skin tint, a little goes a long way. I like to start just with a few dots around the face so as to not overwhelm the skin. And if you feel like you need to apply more, you just apply more. I usually apply my CeraVe moisturizer as a primer, but because the Yummy Skin Serum Tint is a hybrid product, a little bit of makeup, a little bit of skincare, I can rely on this alone to provide that extra moisture and skin care, if you will. And just tapping it around, and you see how that, my goodness, that really boosted my complexion. I could have gone in with 8. I could have, but I don't mind what it's giving. And if I need more coverage, I'll just tap on a little bit more or just go directly on my skin and then tap that product in. Easy to blend. And I do like to use my fingers typically with tints so I could better work it into the skin. Whereas I feel with a brush, it might have a tendency to sit if you don't incorporate it well. And I'm not placing it right directly under the eyes, just around the lower border, if you will. Now, when I first apply it, you see there's a little bit of a sheen left behind. This serum tint is marketed to leave behind a natural radiant finish. It's not going to be soft matte. And depending on what primer you use, if it's on the dewier side, then the finish will appear, I think, even more radiant. But it really all depends on what you decide to do. If you want to steer the Yummy Skin tint to be more soft matte, then you will probably go in first with either the Universal Balm in the Universal shade or the water-based tint that is supposed to soak up excess oil and leave behind more of a soft matte canvas that could influence the finish of the Serum Skin Tint to be more matte. Now let's go in with Lisa's Skin Tint, and I'm excited to see how this will go. The texture is a lot more liquidy, which is fine. But you can see immediately how Lisa's is a lot more neutral. And actually, I gotta hand it to Lisa's insistence for producing skin tint shades that are not so warm. She had explained upon the release of her product that in the makeup industry, that tints are typically formulated to be on the warmer side. And she's like, but what if I just want a tint and not want to look bronzy? And I think that's a valid concern. So of course, Lisa was cooking in the lab and wanted to make her skin tint complexion range more so neutral than anything. And you can see that, yes, the Lisa is a better match for me. It's not going to give me the same amount of glow as the Yummy Skin. Here are my immediate observations. The skin tint has, although it's fragrance free, it still has like a product smell to it, whereas the Yummy Skin has no smell whatsoever. So that is a point for me for Yummy Skin over the Lisa Enhancing Tint. What the Enhancing Tint though gets a point for, I do prefer the finish of the skin tint more. The Yummy Skin is fabulous, and I think highly praised by someone who has drier skin, as the Serum skin tint will provide that needed moisture. It's almost like the skin itself feels like velvet from Lisa's skin tint. You could almost detect from the texture alone its blurring qualities, and I think that's what's appealing about it. Not only the texture of the actual serum and how it leaves my skin, blurring imperfections and such, but the skin match is incredible. Yes, it's not going to give me that little bit of glow like the Yummy Skin does, and in the dead of winter, would I welcome this? Most certainly. But I do like how the skin tint just keeps my complexion where it is, but just enhances it in a way that it evens out my skin tone. It blurs my imperfections. You can still see my blemishes from underneath, but they're less noticeable. Whereas the Yummy Skin, I think, leaves behind definitely more of a radiant finish than the Lisa. You can argue that the Lisa leaves a little bit of a natural finish, but not in the same degree as Danessa skin tint. Let's take this time to go in with the Lift and Flex on one side. Lisa doesn't have a concealer out yet. I know nothing, I'm just saying that, but I'll go with Natasha's on the other side. This is my typical routine if I do apply the Lisa Enhancing Tint. I'll go in with the Enhancing Tint under my eyes as well. Another advantage that 10 has over 9, because 9 will be a little too golden for under the eyes, but I typically will apply Natasha's concealer with Lisa Skin Tint. And just for the sake of practicality, I'll start blending the concealer with my finger. And I think 9 in the Lift and Flex is a good pairing with the 9 for the Yummy Skin tint. And I do feel there's a little bit more creaminess to the Lift and Flex, whereas the Natasha Denona concealer, a little more fluid. And I keep forgetting, Natasha's concealer a little goes a long way. My heavens, I have to be careful in not applying so much at once. But I still think that Natasha's concealer is one of the best concealer products out there at the moment. I have not tried all of them because concealer is something I stopped buying a lot of alongside foundation just because it was just getting crazy, all right? The Lift and Flex appears to be a little more radiant on the finish. I see a little more shine here on this side, but it also has more of that brightening quality about it. Whereas this side is even from under eye to all over the face, where there's a little more distinction here on the Danessa side. Now that we've seen the individual tints perform on their own, it's time to combine them. This is what I was waiting for. Move the tint. Now we get to cocktail a little bit. I don't want to go nuts because, again, I think for both Danessa and Lisa's tints, they're not meant to overwhelm the skin. We want to start light so that we can control the coverage, the level of coverage, and then adjust from there. I combine a dot from each, and you already can see the influence of Danessa's Serum tint in terms of the shade, right? How it's bringing the Lisa one a little more up in ante, but I still that velvety texture from Lisa's tint, even with the Yummy Skin combined. I typically like to pat down just to make sure that the serums are incorporated well. And that's not bad. That's actually quite nice. If I wanted to just a little bit, what I can do, since I don't want to buy another concealer just for the sole purpose of coverage concerns on my blemishes here, I rather just take a dot of the concealer and now go in with a little bit of the Lift and Flex, right? Because the Lift and Flex is creamier than the skin tint, and combining that, I think adjusts the color well enough. So if I wanted more coverage here on the face around where the blemishes are heavy, I can make that happen without those sections of my face appearing too light. And that's something that I did with Natasha's concealer, where I combined Lisa Skin Tint with Natasha's concealer and then applied that on my face just to kind of adjust the texture a little bit, the consistency, so it was more skin-like and it didn't appear heavy on the complexion. And that ain't bad. That is gorgeous. I love how this looks. And to follow up, I'll now go in with the Lift and Flex on both sides and a little bit. I learned my lesson from the previous demo, and just taking that, concentrating here on the lower inner part of my eye, and then bringing it out and just making sure I have even distribution here. And that is lovely. I'm happy I went with shade 9 because I think it's a good area for brightening as well as coverage. Because sometimes it could be tricky to have both. You naturally will have a little bit of a trade-off, but I gotta get a little bit on my nose here because there's some redness going on that we gotta tackle. Get the brows brushed up. I love them both together. I think they enhance each other's qualities, not only in terms of the texture, but I think it also balances out number 9 a little bit more for my complexion, because you saw how warm it was compared to Lisa's shade 10, but adding shade 10 just dialed down 9 a little bit enough where I think it settles at a shade where it's my skin tone, but just a little bit up from there. This I can do. And again, I feel the influence of Lisa's texture on what it has on Danessa's Serum Tint. But if I may, I think Lisa's Skin Tint for me wins in terms of texture. It's unlike any skin tint I've ever tried. I love it more than her foundation. I've tried her foundation and it didn't sit well with me in terms of how it looked. The shade match was okay, but the finish was just, it felt flat for me. It felt middle of the road in terms of how it left my skin. But the skin tint is an entirely new experience. Again, this velvety texture, blurring qualities while still remaining lightweight, and despite it just being a tint, its ability to blur and just soften imperfections in a way that's subtle but impactful at the same time. And I would attribute those qualities to Danessa's Yummy Skin Tint as well. I do think, in my opinion, you can let me know down below what your experience has been if you have both, that Lisa's texture is just a little more sophisticated in my opinion. That's not wrong or right. It's just what I experienced between the two, that the Serum Skin Tint, I think you definitely feel the more serum-like quality about it, where it does leave behind more of a natural radiant finish. And again, you might prefer that depending on your skin type or depending on how you wish your skin to appear on its own under makeup. If you favor more of that radiant sheen finish on your complexion, then you naturally will like the Yummy Skin more. But if you want more of that blurring quality, maybe Lisa has a better match for you, because I mentioned this also, if you haven't checked it out, I went on Sophia Sees Beauty's live and we talked about makeup budgeting and all that, where we don't buy so much foundation anymore because it ends up being a waste if you don't use it up when the shelf life is like, okay, we're done. It comes down to sometimes not necessarily the texture or not necessarily its coverage abilities, but which brand is going to have your best match. Not only skin shade match, but undertone. And it can be tricky with the tint. And although there's more room for error in a tint because naturally the shades are more flexible across several, I still think people want to nail a good undertone even for a tint, and that's what Lisa delivers for me. The minute I applied this tint, I just noticed it's dead on skin match to my complexion without it appearing dull. And I think that is the advantage I feel Lisa's Skin Tint has over the Prada foundation, where I can build this up and it not appear dull on my complexion, where when I start to build up the Prada, it could get a little, and you could argue, yes, I can combine the Prada foundation with the Suku, but not good enough for me to buy an entire bottle of the Prada foundation. If anything, I would repurchase a bottle of the Hourglass over the Prada foundation, in my opinion, or I'll purchase another jar of the Suku foundation, which I still have quite a lot because I don't use much at once. But those are my standout observations. Oh, I failed to show what the blurring skin balm can look like. If you apply it on top of the skin tint, maybe we can go in a little closer again to see if we wanted to influence the finish of the Yummy Skin to be a little more soft matte by applying this first. Let's take this off again and I'll be right back. Bare skin again. Let's go in with Danessa's Blurring Balm, and I'm using Wayne's Cheek Brush, which I don't think appropriate to use with this type of a product. Is too flexible because it is meant to be a cheek brush, but I would say similar to what I've seen Danessa's My Kit Code Brush collab designed to look like, except I think that might be a little wider and shorter and denser for better pickup and application. Nevertheless, I will still whip this on because I think it still picks up enough to see what we can get with combining the blurring balm and the Yummy Skin Tint, right? Or you can do the reverse. And this is what I think is superb about Danessa's Yummy Skin line, is that it is designed to be flexible in how you apply these products, which one you apply first on top of whatever. You don't have to worry except just kind of dive into the experimentation and see what you get and decide from there what will be the best course of action going forward for your designated complexion routine. And again, I have to take a moment in just expressing how much I love the blurring balm. Even though it is meant to be more soft matte than the Yummy Skin, it is closer to the skin tint in terms of finish, right? This is definitely giving more of a velvety finish versus the Serum Skin Tint. But now that we have that laid down, let us see how the Serum Skin Tint applies. But instead of going in with my fingers, as I don't want to disrupt the blurring balm's placement, I'm taking my cheek brush again, apply the Serum Skin Tint on the back of my hand, and now just lightly pouncing over the blurring balm. And I had mentioned before where I'm careful when it comes to using brushes and skin tints to ensure that the skin tint is well incorporated and it doesn't look heavy on the skin, or it doesn't look like it's breaking down once you've applied it, is to warm it up here either on the back of your hand or on a separate palette. Make sure that you get the product evenly distributed throughout the brush, and in that way I think you can avoid too much of a skin tint as it would look if it's sitting on top, right? We don't want it to look like it's sitting on top. We want it to appear like it fuses with the skin. Oh, that's be my new routine. I like that a lot. And this might be great for you because if you were looking at the Serum Skin Tint in action, you're like, I don't know, man, a little too radiant for me. If you already have the blurring balm, or not even, if you have the blurring balm universal, which apparently was a hard product to keep in stock for Danessa, you could plop that on first and then apply the Yummy Skin Tint just to, again, have more of that soft matte effect after the blend. But I think an advantage to using a blurring balm, like a dedicated shade, is not only will you have more of a soft matte finish, but you have a little more coverage as well. Because again, the blurring balm is meant to blur and cover, but more of like a light to medium, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I read up on the product details for the blurring balm. But that's exactly what was happening. Wow. I like this. And I know Wayne's brush is meant for cheek products, but I do like the more flexible nature of this cheek brush for the Serum Tint, because if it was too dense, I think it would have applied too much product. I think purposefully, which I know could be wasteful, but that's why you shouldn't apply so much on the back of your hand on the palette that you're using, that I want the brush to soak up a little bit of the product so it doesn't all plop down on my skin. And just make sure you go around again on the portions that tend to gather or grab product more so than usual, especially here for me. Between the brows is a danger zone. If I apply too much product there, it could look a little funny. Let's brush up these brows, see the finished product. Ooh, I love how this looks. I love how this feels. Color match is fantastic. I think because of the more neutral undertone from number 6, it helps number 9 steer more neutral as well, despite this being neutral olive, right? Combining these two on my complexion is a win. Absolutely. And I could have done the same thing with Lisa's tint, right? Maybe I could have applied the Lisa tint first and then go in with number 6 afterwards, because since they're similar in finish, I don't think it would matter in regards to which one I apply first. But all these products, I am pleased with how well they play with each other, because ultimately I think that is the goal. If you have several complexion products, you kind of figure out what plays well with what. And I think that speaks highly of the individual product's formula, where it's fine by itself, but also fine in a cocktail as well. So that is it. I hope this video was helpful to you, especially if you had any of these products on your radar, you have not yet purchased them, and we're trying to figure out what shade can I get, Alicia? I'm only on the internet, I'm not in store. It was tough to figure out my Lisa shade, but I'm happy I landed on 10 those months ago, and I am thrilled with number 9. I think the Yummy Skin Serum Tint is a fantastic product. Yes, I prefer the finish of Lisa's more, but I will combine the two, not only with Lisa, but now with the Blurring Balm. Because my goodness, what's happening right now, it virtually looks like I applied a dedicated foundation on my skin, just based on the coverage, how it appears on my skin. It doesn't look like makeup. It's exceptional. I think you do have to be careful with how much you apply, what tools you use to influence that skin-like finish. And if you need more coverage, then you add more. It's tougher to take away, and they're also waste products. So I would highly recommend that you start on the light hand, evaluate how the skin is looking, and then maybe go in with a smaller brush, or perhaps combine a little bit of the concealer and the skin tint, just so you can influence the consistency to be more blend friendly on those portions of your skin that might have a little more texture than what's happening under the eyes. And that's about it. Let me know if you have any of these products down below, and if you're like, Alicia, I've been cocktailing, where have you been? If you made it this far, I appreciate you sticking with me all this time. Please consider liking this video. It helps tremendously in telling the algorithm that my videos are fun to watch. And if you want to see more, make sure you subscribe. I love to revisit new products and see how they're doing. I don't forget about them on this channel. Eyeshadow looks, brush reviews, and more. Hopefully you'll consider subscribing, and I'll see you on here again soon.